started. The same rules apply. The candidates will give a 2-minute introductory statement. The timekeepers that are sitting out front will raise a card when there's 30 seconds remaining in your statement. Then when the time is up, they'll have a red card that says stop. The time limits will be strictly observed. Again, I will try to let you finish your statement. And then if it's running too long, I'll interrupt and say thank you. Again, it's only 2 of you guys, so we will rotate your questions, but again, you'll be asked all the questions because it's only 2 of you. And we'll get started. Let's get started with Mr. Isaacs.
All right.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Ted Auch. I have his statement, so I'll read it. He's unable to attend, but he did send a statement. Hopefully it's not longer than 2 minutes. I'll try to cut it off if it is. First, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting together this forum and all in attendance for taking the time out of your busy lives to be here tonight. I regret that I was not able to attend this forum in person due to a work trip to San Francisco that has been scheduled last spring. I have been an activist, advocate, scientist, or educator since I enrolled at the University of Vermont as an undergraduate in 1997. Beginning in 2002, I pursued an MS in forest science at Virginia Tech. The primary reason I did so was because my then advisor, Jim Berger, said to me, as an environmentalist, have you ever been involved in any efforts that have changed state or federal laws? And I sheepishly said that I had not. He responded by saying, well, I have. The realization that activism and advocacy are for naught if they don't merge with science and education to create and or change policy. This was a game changer for me. Fast forward to this last winter when I began to collaborate with NAACP's Ohio's Environmental Justice Team, and for whom I serve on an advisory board, to develop model legislation targeted at increasing fossil fuel data availability, transparency, and quality in Ohio. This policy work in my role as a board of faith communities for a sustainable future, and more recently the Buckeye Environmental Network, has been most rewarding work for my life, and it has taught me the values and to engage and be a curious board member. I have a track record of collaboration, humility, and appreciation for why listening is so critical when systems or communities are facing tough decisions and or trying times. As a member of the board, I will focus on healing wounds, implementing a firm framework for due process that likes of Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and Beechwood already have done, cutting the student-to-teacher ratio and making sure all staff and students, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, religion, or economic circumstances, feel safe and free to be exactly who they are. Technology and glossy programs are helpful tools and marketing fodder, but neither is a substitute for teachers. If we are going to achieve the equity goals we've outlined, we will need to we need a cooperative labor force. I am all for fair negotiations, but zero-sum results where staff, like salt, is being rubbed and the wounds are unacceptable. The only, okay, thank you.
Who was that again?
Ted Auch.
All right. Am I up then?
You're up.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you to you for your role in this and your work, and thank you to the League for the meaningful work that you do to help this community stay informed. I'm Jeff Isaacs. I've been on the school board for 4 years, and I currently serve as board president. I'm also on the Finance and Audit Committee, and I've served on the board's policy committee. If you have students in Shaker schools, I know you'll agree with me that this year's gotten off to a fantastic start. You can feel the buzz at the high school. There have been changes at Woodbury. In the central office, we have a smart and deliberate new superintendent and new curriculum and instruction directors that have hit the ground running. Getting to this point was the result of concerted hard work and thoughtful leadership. I've lived in Shaker Heights for 16 years with my wife, Ann Borchert, and we've raised our 3 sons here. Our youngest, Ty, is in 10th grade. Our older boys graduated from the high school, Andrew in 2013 and Theo in 2015. I'm a Japanese cultural historian by training. I studied Japanese film history and the culture of the 1920s and 1930s. I taught in Japanese junior high schools for 2 years and in a Japanese university for 5 years. I currently work for a Japanese company that designs and manufactures specialty hardware for art museums, the stuff they use to hang, move, and store artwork. I've served in a variety of PTO roles, including as co-PTO president at Boulevard and co-president of PTO Council. I've tutored in our schools, I've been on hiring panels, I've worked on levy campaigns, I've been part of strategic planning. This year, we've taken on strategic planning that will include a long-term facilities plan that will guarantee the success of this district far into the future. Importantly, we've begun to implement the educational equity policy. We are a young school board, and I bring experience. We've put the school district on the right course, and I ask you to return me to office to let me finish this work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me here and having us here today. It's a great event to have. I also want to thank you for coming, and at the same time, do a shout out to the young people from high school who came to show up and do their civic duty. My name is Emmitt R, and I'm running for the Shaker Heights School Board. When I was considering to run for bid, I had a conversation with John Morris, who's the president of the Shaker Heights Teachers Union, and one of the things that he said is that as a member of the school board, you are serving in the highest form of public service, a service which shapes the lives of generations of students. I moved to Shaker Heights almost 11 years ago with my wife, Stacy, who's a medical educator as well, a physician educator. When we came here, we had to find a place that would be accepting of a mixed family. Children who are both of American Indian, African American, as well as Swedish descent, and a place where they would be accepted and have the academic rigor that we would expect from people in our occupations. In the end, we chose Shaker. We embraced the community. We embraced its athletic teams. We embraced its music. We found that this was the place that was going to be the home for us. One of the things I learned in the process is that the districts in the city are named for its schools, which tells you the importance of the schools themselves on the city. The city itself revolves around the schools. If the schools fail, the city fails. Consequently, I'm here to play my role to ensure long-term high-quality education for all Shaker High students, and play a role in volunteering in the highest form of public service. I've been engaged in education for many, many years. I've gotten awards from the governor of Alabama, as well as the California State Senate for leadership. I've been engaged in diversity for probably 20 years and gotten leaderships in all of them. I ask that you let me perform that, use my expertise to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question is, Shaker has seen declining public school enrollment. What should the Shaker School Board do in response to forecasts for continued enrollment decline? We'll start with you, Mr. Isaacs.
Well, so the first thing I'd like to say is that this is a regional issue, not a Shaker issue, and I'd like to point out that if you look back at the last 10 years, we have indeed lost something over 500 students, but that our neighbors, chief among them, because they're a similar size, Cleveland Heights and Solon, have both lost students more rapidly than we have. So we've gone against trend. I think there's a lot going right in Shaker. We need to market ourselves, and we need to look at it as an opportunity. If the trend continues and it's a demographic trend that we can't do anything about, then let's embrace it and use it as a way to right-size ourselves smartly. And if we can reverse the trend, by all means, let's do that. The collaboration with the city on this count is definitely a key to moving forward, and the Forward Together collaborative planning initiative is, I'd like to point that out as an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Jolly.
The real challenge here in part is that as we get declining school populations, we get less money associated with the school district. So the question is, how can we survive with less funding and support for the schools? The more straightforward answer is to ensure that we maintain strong fiscal responsibility, that we close whatever loopholes and try to manage our money much more effectively. And I think that itself is a challenge, it's important, and trying to cut something that's already cut will be challenging. That being said, there's also an alternative approach, which is we could take advantage of the pre-K program. One of the advantages of the pre-K program is that for the pre-K program, often students tend to do better long-term in school. Right now, we've started a program where students basically can come in. Some people pay for it. It also helps minority students. But there's a lot more money going into pre-K programs, including a bill by the governor. If we do this, this increases the student population, and therefore we can get more money from the state.
Thank you. Next question. A plain dealer article this week said that even when adjusting for income, Shaker has one of the lower rankings among all districts in the state. Why is this, and what would you do to address it, Mr. Jolly?
Did you ask the middle part of the question again?
Sure. I'll read the whole thing again.
Okay.
A plain dealer article this week said that even when adjusting for income, Shaker has one of the lower rankings among all districts in the state. Why is this, and what would you do to address it?
So one of the challenges that you're asking is, why is it that our rankings are low? And I think part of the challenge that we have is, there is a racial discrepancy that occurs within our school systems. It is something that we have to address in order to move forward. I look at Shaker from one perspective. As one group, when a person comes into Shaker, they immediately look at our rankings. That defines whether people move into the city or don't move into the city. If we are going to be able to increase the number of people who come here, who enjoy our school system in the same way that we enjoy the school system, we have to deal with the discrepancy between the students at the highest level and the students at the lower level. And so what we have to do is really work at building and increasing the academic as well as social needs for the people in the middle.
Thank you. Mr. Isaac?
So I did take a look at that article. That was, I think, Rich Exner, who does the data pieces. And it's a sort of a simple formula in which your median income either adds or subtracts to your state ranking. So my understanding is that since we have a very large spread in income, our median income winds up being higher, even though our free and reduced lunch rate may be relatively higher. So it's kind of a statistical, in this particular manipulation, we wind up looking like we're doing less well than we should, when in fact, it's just who we are. I don't think that it's a fair measure, and we had, in fact, a report out on the state report card on Tuesday at our work session, and there was definitely positive information, positive data that was shared with us, that we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Next question. Last year was an incredibly difficult year for our school district. A certain level of trust in the district and the Board of Education has been broken. How will you, as a board member, work to mend these strained relationships with teachers, parents, and other Shaker Heights? I think it's cut off. Well, other Shaker Heights residents, I assume.
Must have gone over 1 minute.
Oh, Mr. Isaac, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. So I definitely lived through the past year. We absolutely had our challenges. It was quite a series of events that took place, starting with the fire at Fernway. I think we've invested a lot in the relationships as a school district. We know that relationships are important. We brought in leaders in the high school and to lead the district who are sensitive to this and who are skilled at rebuilding relationships. I'm not sure that the board has a strained relationship with, with the larger portion of our teaching staff and the rest of our staff, but we certainly are attentive to that and make every effort to, we value those relationships and make every effort to pursue those. The proof is in the pudding for the community, which is that as we're successful, I think the trust builds.
Thank you.
I appreciate that question. I think it has been a challenge over the last year, and it's been difficult for many people. like Mr. Isaac, I've had the opportunity to go visit lots of block parties, interacting with people and talking to get ideas of what people think about the district. And it's mixed. There are some people who have no trust in the system, and there are others that really, really support it. In order for us to move forward, it is critical that we build this relationship. This means building strong relations not only with teachers, but also building strong relationship with students. One of the challenges is sometimes we have a system where teachers are thinking about leaving the school district to go to other districts. And students at the same time are feeling that they aren't comfortable or safe or appreciated inside the classrooms. So we have to work not only at the teacher level and student level, but we also have to find a way of engaging parents in order to build this trust.
Thank you. Next question. Many city actions affect property values, and property values directly impact school funding. Are there any actions you would like the city to undertake that would help school funding? Starting with Mr. Jolly.
Oh, you would start me with that one. So I'm going to start with where I was in my introduction. The city of Shaker is built around its schools. If the schools fail, the city fell. And in essence, one of the things that I really like about Shaker is that not only do people who have children support the schools, but people who do not have children in the district also support the schools. And the reason that we continue to support the schools is that we understand that by supporting the schools, we're in essence maintaining our property values. People move here for the schools. I chose Shaker, my wife and I chose Shaker because of the school system that's here. And I think that, I would probably argue that what we'd like to do is maintain the schools at the status and increase the amount of funding that we have.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Isaacs.
I definitely agree with Dr. Jolly. I'd like to point out that the DeRolf decision, and there have been 4 times when the state Supreme Court has ruled that our state funding formula is unconstitutional. And there has been little attempt to address that in the legislature because politically it's a hot potato. There's a piece of legislation that developed called Cupp-Patterson. It still exists in somewhat modified form. We're obviously very interested in it and in shaping it if we possibly can. But I would say the single greatest thing that would help us as a community is if the Ohio Department of Education would get rid of letter grades on the state report card and go to a more reflective, almost narrative approach and show us the data and let us evaluate the data, because it's a complex, overly complex formula that reduces a lot of information to you gotta be.
Great, thank you. Next question. It's 2 questions that's similar. So the first question says, and I'll let you speak to it before I ask the second question, but the second question is related to equity as well. The equity policy adopted in February references an equity tool. Thus far, there is no tool. What would such a tool include, and how will we assess the equity quotient of the district's initiatives? Starting with Mr. Isaacs.
So in February, the school board adopted the educational equity policy. It was an output of our equity task force, which finished its 2-year term at the end of this past school year. The equity tool is essentially a measuring stick by which you're meant to understand any action, any policy, anything you undertake as a school district. It states your values, and it's there to remind you that you're either moving in a direction that helps equity or you're moving in a direction that hurts equity. So we're in the process of working through identifying what that would be. We're working with Erica Merritt as a partner on this, and we're waiting for Dr. Glassner and Ms. Merritt to put some more examples in front of us. We've certainly been looking at things, but to sort of hone things down, and I see the red stop signs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jolly.
So the equity tool is something that's really critical. And the importance of this tool is to make sure that all decisions that are made at different levels ask a simple question. Is this equitable? Will this affect people at different levels? Does it in some way block equitability? And so a tool like this should simply initially be used first to ask questions. For every decision that the board makes, what is the downstream effect? Does it negatively affect equity? At the same time, this same tool should also ask the same question at the level of the superintendent and even at the level of teachers. One thing that's really important is that if someone's going to use an equity tool, that we know how to use it. So it's important that training in equity also be included along with usage of the tool.
Great, thank you. And next question, similar in nature, why is equity and inclusion important to you, and how will that come to bear as you serve on the school board? Mr. Jolly, we'll start with you.
Why is equity and inclusion important to me? I worked in a cotton field. I chopped cotton. I walked down in 98-degree weather, mile-long rows of cotton with a hoe. My job was to cut down weeds. I then got a job working in a truck stop as a janitor, and I loved the job. And the reason I loved it was because it was in air conditioning. I went to lunch, and there happened to be a young lady who was my age there, and I went to lunch with her. And the second day I went to lunch with her, and we had a conversation, and I went back to work, and my boss asked me, did I have lunch with the young lady next door? He immediately fired me for having lunch with a white girl. When you ask why is equity important, those are the reasons which block people from being able to reach a level where both groups have opportunities. I was lucky that I had mentors that were able to take me from chopping cotton to chopping jeans.
Thank you. Mr. Isaacs?
So I think equity should be important to all of us. I think that when we came to this community, we wanted to raise our children in a place that could do, that valued all students, that valued all children. I had the experience shortly after moving here with cooperating with two other parents to do a tutoring program at Boulevard, cooperating with a second grade teacher there. So I spent 3 hours a week in Boulevard for 2 years. And to me, that was a transformative experience. You can see sort of on a subtle level what we are and aren't able to do in our schools, and we just need to be better at addressing the needs of all students and making sure that wherever students are, we meet them and give the supports that they need.
Thank you. Next question, are you in favor of live streaming Board of Education meetings as they do in Cleveland Heights and University Heights? And if yes, will you work to make this happen, Mr. Isaacs?
That's an interesting one. I mean, we do record the board meetings. There's an audio recording already made of them. I suppose I'm not opposed to it, but I think that we're in an age when, accessibility is much more digital, and it's something that we definitely have to consider.
Thank you. Mr. Jolly?
I don't have any negative reasons for not doing it. I think we are in a position where it's possible. However, we should always consider the cost effectiveness of doing it. I think it's a feasible thing. If it's something that people are interested in doing and really have strong opinions about, I'd support it.
Great, thank you. Next question. How can our council, library, and schools collaborate on services, facilities, financial practices, and planning to improve outcomes and reduce costs? Mr. Jolly?
So you've highlighted all the things that people need. And I think that one of the challenges right now is that these groups are trying to work together, but they may have not necessarily completed, brought together in a strong way how to support each other. I think you need a task force to try to figure out what is the best way that these groups can work together. I'm not an expert in either one of them. I'm very comfortable by saying that. However, one of the things that I know from other experiences is that we've had challenges where very different groups that actually want the same outcome have different approaches, and it's critical that you bring these approaches together and to work effectively.
Thank you. Mr. Isaacs?
So I think that it's extremely important, and in fact, the library, the city, the schools have begun that process in the Forward Together initiative, and the draft of that plan is available. You can look at it online. It's about to be finalized, and it identifies community priorities, where we can share, where we have overlapping interests and goals, and it gives something of a time frame for which items to take on first. Really, this initiative started to look at the physical assets that Shaker has across each of these organizations and to look for synergies, and the discussion sort of snowballed from there, and we realized exactly the things that were contained in the question, that there are opportunities available. We need to be cooperating with each other as we do our own long-term planning and continuing to share that information so that we can build these sort of smart, shared services, et cetera, into the long-term plans.
Thank you. Next question. Many kids in the Shaker School say there are diversity issues within the school. How would you make sure that you're implementing different diverse issues to make sure that all the students feel included within the school systems? And that will be Mr. Isaacs.
I think that's an issue that we've been addressing and dealing with in our Shaker schools for decades now. I think we're in an excellent place. I'm very glad that the equity policy is where it is. I think that will help things. We have active student organizations that already are interested and involved in doing this, such as SCORE. There's an NAACP chapter at the high school. There are a number of social justice organizations at the high school and at the middle school particularly. I think that what happened last November certainly brought that to the forefront, that students want to be heard. And if you've ever had the chance to go to a SCORE-sponsored conversation, I highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. And I believe they've cooperated some with the League of Women Voters, in fact, to do some programming.
Great, thank you. Mr. Jolly?
An older gentleman who I spoke with last week was somewhat frustrated. And what he told me is that Shaker has two schools, a school for more elite white students and a school for poor black students. It was really intriguing to listen and to hear this. And then this being followed by the recent article that came out in Shakerite recently called Being Black in Shaker Schools. And these say that there are challenges that we still have to address, challenges that we still have to deal with. It's well established that one of the difficulties is that even with the great school teachers that we have and with students, that one of the things that's missing is bias training. And it is often implicit bias or unconscious bias that causes people to make decisions and microaggressions that they themselves don't understand that they're causing others to experience. So I think one of the important things is to have this training in the schools.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question. Our final question is, last year was an incredibly difficult year for our school district. A certain level of trust has been broken. How will you make sure that the students and parents regain trust within the school system? And
That was the first
did I
question?
ask that?
I think so.
Wait a
yeah.
minute. Hold on.
I thought it was a good question then too.
Okay. All right, if I asked it, I asked it. I didn't see that one, but okay.
It was very similar, the first one. I think.
Well, then that's it. That's all of our questions. Is there any more questions in the audience, from the audience? Okay, great. Thank you. Give our candidates a big round of applause.